The voicemail lasted 4 minutes and 32 seconds. My youngest son accidentally called me from his kitchen table on a Tuesday night in early October, and I sat in my truck in the CVS parking lot on Broad Street for 4 minutes and 32 seconds, listening to my 3 adult children decide that their father's 70th birthday wasn't worth the drive from Cincinnati. I want to get to what happened next, because what happened next is the part that changed everything. But let me back up first. My name is Stan. I'm 69 years old, 70 now, technically, and I spent 31 years as a firefighter in Columbus, Ohio. Retired 6 years ago with a pension, 2 bad knees, and more memories than I know what to do with. I live in the same house I bought with my wife Jean in 1991, a 3-bedroom colonial on a quiet street in Westerville, where the oak trees are so old they arch over the road and make it feel like a tunnel in summer. Jean loved those trees. She'd sit on the front porch every evening with a glass of sweet tea and watch the light come through the leaves. Jean died 5 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. I watched a man burn alive in a warehouse fire once. I say that so you understand the scale of what I mean when I tell you losing Jean was the worst thing I've ever experienced. That's just the truth. After she was gone, I understood for the first time what it means when they say a house isn't a home. The building was still there. The furniture, the photos, her African violets that I kept watering because I couldn't bring myself to let them die. But without Jean, it was just 4 walls and a roof and the sound of the refrigerator humming. I have 3 kids. My oldest son is 42, lives in Cincinnati with his wife Wendy and their 3 children. He works in finance. Good suit, always somewhere to be. My middle son is 38, a building contractor, perpetually exhausted, married to a woman named Kim who teaches preschool and is one of the quieter, kinder people I've ever known. And then there's my daughter, 35, a registered nurse, married to a man named Marco who I genuinely like, with 2 kids who call me Pop Pop and who I try to see whenever I'm welcome. After Jean died, I became the kind of father I should have been when she was alive. She was the one who'd held everything together. She remembered which grandchild was going through a rough patch in school. She called each of the kids every week and asked real questions, not just how are you, but actual questions. What's going on with your contractor bid? How are you handling the new hours? She knew their lives the way a cartographer knows a territory. Every road, every elevation change. I had learned to follow her map without ever learning to read it myself. So I had to learn. From scratch. A 64-year-old retired firefighter who'd spent 3 decades running into burning buildings, now trying to figure out how to hold a family together through phone calls and dinner invitations and FaceTime. I called too much sometimes, I know that. Sunday afternoons would get quiet and I'd pick up the phone without quite meaning to. I planned things too carefully. I'm aware of my tendencies. But I tried. I tried like it was the most important assignment I'd ever been given. When my 70th birthday came into view last summer, I decided I wanted to do something real. Not a surprise party. Jean was the party person. Not me, but a dinner. Something proper. I booked a private room at Carmine's, the Italian place we'd been going to since 1995. The kind with white tablecloths and a bread basket they refill without being asked. I put down an $800 deposit. I sent actual invitations in envelopes to each of the kids, the kind where you have to slide your finger under the flap. I spent a few weeks thinking about the seating arrangement. I know how that sounds, but I wanted my oldest son's youngest near my middle son's boy, because they're close in age and I thought they'd enjoy each other. I wanted my daughter near me, because we don't get enough time. I probably called her 3 times in September just to confirm details. She always picked up, said she was looking forward to it. Now I need to tell you about October 8th. I was sitting in my truck in the CVS parking lot, about to go pick up my blood pressure medication. I just pulled in when my phone lit up. Incoming call from my middle son. I answered, said, "Hey, bud." Nothing, just background noise, dishes, a television somewhere, then voices. He hadn't meant to call me. He'd pocket-dialed me from his kitchen table, and the call connected, and he had no idea. And for the next 4 minutes and 32 seconds, I sat there with the phone against my ear and listened. My oldest was on speakerphone. My daughter, too, by the sound of it. "The whole thing is just a lot," my daughter was saying. "He called me about the seating chart, Ryan. The seating chart." I know. My oldest son's voice, flat, almost bored. Every event with him is a production now. Since Mom died, it's gotten worse. He just gets so. I don't know. Needy isn't the right word. "It kind of is," my oldest said. A pause. Someone setting something on a counter. So what are we actually doing? My middle son said. Wendy's parents have a place at Lake Erie that weekend, my oldest said. It's been planned for months. I told them we'd be there. So you're not coming? I don't want to blow up an entire weekend with the in-laws over a dinner. He'll understand. Shannon, that was my middle son, asking my daughter. Marco's sister is in town, she said. And honestly, the drive is 4 hours round trip and I'm already working that Saturday morning. I'm exhausted, Justin. I really can't. So we're all bailing, my middle son said. There was something in his voice. Not disagreement exactly. More like resignation, which was somehow worse. We'll do something after, my daughter said. A brunch the following week. He'll be fine. He just has to understand we have our own lives now. He calls me every Sunday, my oldest said. Every single Sunday. I love him, but I need him to understand I'm not available on demand. So what do we tell him? My middle son said. Work trip, my oldest said. He never questions that. I'll say one of the kids has a stomach thing, my daughter said. Justin, what are you going to do? My oldest said. A beat. Fine, my middle son said quietly. I'll think of something. Before I go any further, I want to ask something. If you're listening to this right now, drop a comment and tell me. Where are you? What time is it? I want to know I'm not talking into the dark by myself. I sat in that parking lot a long time. The pharmacy was still open. The prescription wasn't going anywhere. I didn't cry. I spent 31 years on a fire crew, and I can count on one hand the times I've cried as an adult. When my oldest was born and there was a complication, a few terrible seconds before he made a sound. When we put Jean in the ground. But I sat in that truck and I felt something leave me. Not love. Love didn't go anywhere. But some version of hope I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for 5 years. The quiet hope that if I just tried hard enough, if I called on the right days and planned the right dinners, they would eventually see it. See me. The way Jean saw me. I called the restaurant that night. Sal, the owner, picked up himself. I told him my family situation had changed and I wanted to open the room up. Fill it with whoever wanted to come. I'd cover up to 20 people. Dinner was still happening. November 14th, 7 p.m. I just needed different guests. Sal was quiet for a moment. You sure about this, Stan? I'm sure, I said. I called the VA Community Center on Morse Road, where I'd been volunteering Thursday mornings for the past 2 years. Told them I was having a birthday dinner, and if any veterans were spending that evening alone, they were welcome. I called my old fire station on 5th. Whoever picked up, I gave the same message. Then I posted on Nextdoor. Kept it simple. Turning 70 on November 14th. Family can't make it this year. I've got a private room at Carmen's dinner for 20, all covered. If you'd rather not spend the evening alone, come on out. No gift, no obligation. Just food and good people. Responses came in within the hour. Over the following weeks, I went through the motions of the calls I knew were coming. My oldest, 2 weeks before, huge work thing, trip to Chicago, can't get out of it. I told him I understood. I hoped the trip went well. My daughter a few days after. One of the kids had a stomach bug, couldn't risk spreading it. Of course, I said, hope everyone feels better. My middle son texted. His mother-in-law needed help moving, wrong weekend, really sorry. I sent back a thumbs up. Not one of them knew the room was already full. November 14th. 18 people showed up. 4 veterans from the VA Center. The oldest of them was 78 years old, served in Vietnam, still getting around with a walker. He showed up in a pressed button-down shirt with a pocket square. He told me at the table that his kids lived in Phoenix, and he hadn't had a proper birthday dinner of any kind in 11 years. He said it the way you say something that has long since stopped surprising you, which made it harder to hear than if he'd been bitter about it. 7 of my old crew from the station, including my former captain, a man named Holloway, who I hadn't seen since my retirement party and who drove 40 minutes from Dublin without me asking. He said someone had forwarded him the Nextdoor post. My neighbor Bert, who lost his wife the previous spring, and who I'd been checking on quietly every couple of weeks. He brought a bottle of Barolo and looked genuinely relieved to have somewhere to go. A young couple from 2 streets over who'd shoveled my driveway 3 times last winter without being asked. They brought their 8-year-old, who ate 2 full plates of pasta and informed me I seemed like a cool grandpa. A woman from my church named Dolores, a widow, who'd lost her husband to a stroke 2 years ago, and who sat beside me most of the evening and laughed at my terrible jokes about getting old without any visible effort. And 2 men from my Tuesday woodworking class at the community center, both retired, Both the kind of guys who show up and do the work and don't make a lot of noise about anything. Sal brought out a birthday cake I hadn't ordered. 3 tiers, white frosting. Said the kitchen wanted to do it. Holloway stood up and gave a toast that made 2 of the veterans cry. Not the sad kind, the other kind. One of my old crew posted a photo to Facebook that night. 18 people around a long table, me in the middle, the candles blurring the light. The caption read, "Happy 70th to the best man I know." His family couldn't be there, but WE showed up. Because that's what you do for Stan Gallagher. I didn't see the post until the following morning. By then it had 412 shares. My oldest son called at 7:14 that evening, while I was still in the restaurant parking lot helping Dolores find a cab. I saw his name on the screen and put the phone in my pocket. He called twice more. A text came through. "Dad, what is this Facebook post? Can you call me?" My daughter, "Dad, I'm seeing this. I feel sick. Please call me back." My middle son, "Pops, I didn't know you had dinner. I'm really sorry." I turned the phone to silent, drove home, made tea, sat in Jean's chair by the window. I'd given myself permission to do that about a year ago, and looked at the oak tree in the front yard and let myself be still. The following Saturday morning, all 3 of them showed up at my door. My oldest first, because he's always first, then my daughter's car, then my middle son's truck. They stood on my porch holding flowers, looking like people who hadn't slept. I let them knock twice before I opened the door. I didn't invite them in. I stepped out, pulled the door nearly shut behind me, and stood on my own porch in my cardigan in the November cold. My oldest started, because he always starts. "Dad, we owe you a real apology, what we did." "I know what you did," I said. He stopped. "I know because your brother called me from his kitchen on October 8th and didn't realize the call went through. I watched their boss faces change. I heard all of it. The Lake Erie weekend, the work trip to Chicago. The stomach bug that wasn't a stomach bug. I looked at my daughter when I said the last part. She looked like the floor might open under her. I heard your brother say I was needy. I heard you say I needed to understand you have your own lives now. I heard you both assign each other your excuses like it was a project." My daughter made a sound I hadn't heard from her since she was small. "Dad," my oldest said, "we were venting. Everyone vents. It wasn't." "Venting is fine," I said. 31 years in a firehouse, I know what venting sounds like. But venting doesn't get coordinated. You divided up the lies. The oak tree dropped a few last leaves onto the sidewalk. No one said anything. "I don't need you to explain it," I said. "I need you to hear something." They waited. "I spent 5 years trying to be what your mother was for this family. I called too much, I know. I planned too carefully. But I was terrified of fading. Terrified of becoming the father you visit at Christmas out of obligation and don't think about the rest of the year." I let a breath out. Turns out I was heading there anyway, and trying harder wasn't going to change that. "Dad, that's not," my oldest started. "I've already made some changes," I said. "I met with an estate attorney 3 weeks ago. The bulk of what your mother and I saved together, nearly 90%, goes to the Columbus Fire Department Legacy Fund and the VA Community Center on Morse Road. The remainder gets split 3 ways, held in trust until each of you turns 60. If any of you legally challenges the arrangement, your share becomes 0. My oldest's jaw tightened. He's a finance person. He did the calculation in about 3 seconds. "Dad, you can't restructure your whole estate because you're hurt." "I made that appointment before your birthday excuses came in," I said. "Before the Facebook post. I made it the week after October 8th, because that's when I realized I'd been making myself smaller to fit into the edges of your lives, and it wasn't working anyway. Your mother didn't raise me to do that. I don't know why I thought I had to." I looked at each of them. My oldest with his good jacket and the gray starting at his temples. My daughter with Jean's eyes, which still surprised me sometimes. My middle son, who looks more like me than the other 2, who had been staring at the porch boards and not looking up. He finally did. His eyes were red. "Pop," he said, and his voice broke on just that one word. He's the quietest of the 3. When he says something, it costs him. "I know," I said. "I knew it was wrong when we were doing it," he said. "I didn't say enough. I should have just called you myself and told you I couldn't come." "Yes," I said. "You should have." "I'm ashamed of it." "I know that too. I looked at all 3 of them. I'm not cutting you out. That's not what this is. But I'm 69 years old and I don't have unlimited years ahead of me, and I'm not spending them waiting for scraps of your attention. You want to be in my life, you come back and you try. Not because of a Facebook post. Not because of the will, because you actually want to know your father. I went inside. I closed the door. I didn't watch from the window as they stood on the porch, and talked and eventually got in their cars and left. The following Sunday, my oldest called at 8 in the morning. We used to talk at that time when he was in college, before the rates changed and calls got cheap. He probably didn't even realize he'd chosen that hour. I noticed. We talked for 40 minutes. His new manager, a project he was trying to lead, his oldest boy who'd been struggling in school. Real things. I listened the way Jean used to listen, with both ears and no agenda. My daughter came up in January. Just drove up on a Saturday morning with her daughter Maisie and a bag of groceries. No particular reason given. We spent the afternoon in the kitchen. Maisie decorated cookies with so much frosting they became architectural concerns. My daughter laughed the way she used to laugh before she had a mortgage and a 12-hour nursing schedule, and for a few hours the house smelled like it used to. At one point she stopped in the middle of rolling out dough and said, "Dad, I'm sorry I made you feel like a burden. That was never true. I think I was scared of how much I need you sometimes. Like if I let myself need you too much and then something happened." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "I'm not going anywhere for a while," I said. "I know," she said. "I'm learning to let that be enough." My middle son took the longest. He came in February, alone, on a Sunday afternoon, and walked directly into my garage without knocking. I was working on a corner cabinet. He stood and watched me for a while. Then he picked up the belt sander and looked at me. I nodded. We worked side by side until 6 o'clock without saying much, which is honestly how the two of us have always communicated best. Then I heated up soup, and we sat at the kitchen table, and he told me about a house he was renovating in German Village, an old brick thing from 1898, and his eyes lit up the way they used to when he was 12 years old, and we were building a go-kart in this same garage. Before he left, he said, "I should have just called you and told you I couldn't make it, 2 months out, given you time to plan around it. Instead, I let everyone talk me into a lie." "Yes," I said. "I won't do that again." "I know," I said, and I believed him. The Legacy Fund dinner happened in April. The fire department holds it annually to honor fallen firefighters and support their families. I'd donated before, small amounts over the years, but this year my estate attorney had formalized the contribution, and the fund director reached out and asked if I'd say a few words at the event. All 3 of my kids came, their spouses, all 6 grandkids. My son-in-law Marco sat next to Holloway, and they talked about structural loads and building codes for 40 minutes, and seemed to enjoy themselves enormously. I watched them from across the table and thought about how much Jean would have liked Marco. She always said Shannon had good taste in people. When I went up to speak, I talked about Jean, about the way she used to say that love isn't a noun, it's a verb, that it's what you do, not what you feel, that a life built out of showed-up moments is worth more than 1,000 good intentions. I looked out at my kids while I said it. They looked back at me. My middle son's boy, Brady, 11 years old, quiet and observant in the way his father has always been, had been tracking everything I said all evening. After dinner, he came and stood beside me and told me he wanted to learn woodworking. I told him to come by any Saturday. He's been there almost every weekend since. For my 71st birthday, my oldest called me in September to talk about the plans. He'd already booked the private room at Carmine's. He called to ask what I wanted, not to confirm when I needed him to arrive, not to negotiate a shorter version of the evening. Just, "It's your birthday, Pop. What do you want?" 18 people came that night, too. My 3 kids and their families, Bert from next door, Dolores from church, Captain Holloway, 2 of the veterans from the VA who'd come the year before. The couple from 2 streets over brought their 8-year-old again, who ate 2 full plates of pasta, and informed me I was an even cooler grandpa than last year, which I took as the highest possible compliment. My daughter stood up partway through dinner. She hadn't prepared anything. You could tell. She just put down her glass and stood up. She said, "Dad, I spent a long time telling myself I was too busy for you. I wasn't too busy. I was scared. You remind me of Mom, and sometimes that's hard to sit with. But I'm learning that it's also the best thing, and I don't want to keep missing it." She paused. "Happy birthday. We love you. We're here." The table was quiet for a second. Then Brady started clapping the way 11-year-olds clap, loud and slightly off-tempo, and everyone else joined in. I looked down at my plate so no one could see my face. Jean would have laughed at me for that. She would have said, "Stan, you made it this far, and you're still embarrassed when someone says something nice. You hopeless man. I talked to her photograph when I got home that night. Set my keys on the counter, stood in the kitchen, looked at the photo on the shelf. Her laughing at something off camera in the summer of 1997, eyes squinted shut, hair blowing. We got there, I told her. Took a wrong turn or two, but we got there. The thing I want to leave you with, and I mean this for anyone listening who recognizes something of themselves in this story, isn't that you should punish the people who hurt you. It isn't even about the will or the Facebook post or the birthday dinner that spread around my neighborhood. It's simpler than that. You have to be willing to live like you're worth something, even when the people closest to you are behaving like you're not. My kids loved me even when they were planning excuses in that kitchen. Love was never the question. The question was whether I was willing to act like a man who deserved to be loved, instead of a man begging for proof of it. When I stopped begging, something shifted. Not overnight, not without setbacks, but it shifted. They came around because I stopped making it easy for them not to. Because I filled that room on November 14th with people who showed up, and I let them see through a photograph on Facebook what they had almost missed. Not out of spite. Out of the simple truth that my life was going to keep going with or without their permission. If you're sitting somewhere quiet right now, wondering whether the people in your life truly see you, they might not yet, but you can show them. Not by shrinking, not by waiting. By filling a room with good people and living the kind of life that speaks for itself. The right ones will notice. And then one day they will show up.